A reading from Luke chapter 2, beginning at verse 22. And when the time came for their purification, according to the law of Moses, Joseph and Mary brought Jesus up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every male who first opens the womb shall be called holy to the Lord, and to offer a sacrifice, according to what is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtledoves or 2 young pigeons. Now there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon, and this man was righteous and devout, waiting for the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. And it had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he would not see death before he had seen the Lord's Christ. And he came in the Spirit into the temple, and when the parents brought in the child Jesus, to do for him according to the custom of the law, he took him up in his arms and blessed God and said, Lord, now you are letting your servant depart in peace according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, that you have prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light for revelation to the Gentiles, and for glory to your people Israel. And his father and his mother marvelled at what was said about him. And Simeon blessed them and said to Mary his mother, Behold, this child is appointed for the fall and rising of many in Israel, and also for a sign that is opposed, and a sword will pierce through your soul also, so that thoughts from many hearts may be revealed. And there's a prophetess, Anna, the daughter of Phanuel, of the tribe of Asher. She was advanced in years, having lived with her husband 7 years, from when she was a virgin, and then as a widow, until she was 84. She did not depart from the temple, worshipping with fasting and prayer night and day. And coming up at that very hour, she began to give thanks to God, and to speak of him to all who were waiting for the redemption of Jerusalem. And when they had performed everything according to the law of the Lord, they returned into Galilee, to their own town of Nazareth. And the child grew and became strong, filled with wisdom, and the favour of God was upon him. I don't know if you have a mental image of Simeon. Luke doesn't really say much about him in his Gospel, although there's enough in the few words to gain something of an idea of the man. He's described as righteous and devout, waiting for the consolation of Israel. And this word, waiting, is a telling one, because it conjures up the image of one of those people who just has a quiet confidence in God. He knew God. God knew him. He was a righteous man and had grown close to God over the years. He was a peaceful man, eager that God would be honoured, and patient, just waiting on God. But there's more to this as well, because we also see here that he's a man who's been told by God that he would not die before he saw the Lord's Christ. And so he waited. He waited to see this person who would grow up to be the Christ, the Messiah, the Anointed One, the person who would bring people back to God. And so here was Simeon, confident in God, waiting to see the Messiah. And cradled in those age-worn arms was Jesus himself, wondering, I wonder, whether those parents were anxious, hoping that Simeon would be careful because the stone floors, they're hard. He was in the temple and this young couple had presented their son to him. Simeon took up Jesus in his arms to pray. And at that moment he realised who it was that he was holding. This was the one. This was the child he'd been waiting for, the one promised by the Holy Spirit. And so he prayed, Lord, now you are letting your servant depart in peace, according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, that you have prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light for revelation to the Gentiles, and glory for your people Israel. And as you read this passage, there are one or two things that might strike you. First of all, here you have a man who's supremely confident in the face of death, a man who was quite ready to die. Not for him the litany of regrets and fear which might dog some. Rather, his focus was resolutely on the future and the waiting arms of God. Not for him the fear of the unknown, but rather the hope of reconciliation with the one whom he knew well. he was ready to depart in peace. How was this wonderful peace attained? Well, that brings me to the second thing we might notice, Simeon's friendship with God. Note how Simeon was described. He was righteous, devout, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. This was a person who was not content to simply go to the temple and just watch. No, here was a person who was joyfully serious in his faith. He prayed, he knew his God. For him, prayer was a two-way affair, not simply leaving a message on a divine answer phone. Through the Holy Spirit, he related to God. And this relating to God meant that he knew precisely who it was that was cradled in his arms. He saw with his own eyes the salvation that God had prepared there in his hands. He held in his own hands the child who would reconcile us to God and who would save us from ourselves. Simeon was confident in God, and God repaid the confidence. And so he had seen that God had acted. God had responded to our need by sending Jesus. He sent his only Son to provide us with a way back to him. Now, many people had seen this baby. I'm sure he'd been shown off to all sorts of friends and relations. Come and see our new baby. Isn't he divine? This child had been picked up 100 times, but only Simeon realised who it was that he had in his arms. Only Simeon realised who this child was. More than just Mary's boy, Simeon's eyes were opened by God, and he was allowed to glimpse something of the future of this child. And then Simeon said something quite extraordinary, and this is my final observation. Behold, this child is appointed for the fall and rising of many in Israel, and for a sign that is opposed. And a sword will pierce through your soul also, so that thoughts from many hearts may be revealed. This prophecy is, of course, as insightful as it is true, because at Christmas a choice entered the world. When Jesus was born, things would never be the same again. Jesus is a defining point in history. We date our calendars from his birth, but he's also a dividing point. He divides because people either accept him or reject him. There's no neutral ground. There's no room for, I don't know. I don't know is simply another way of rejecting. And so Simeon prophesied that Jesus would cause the rising and falling of many. And that's true. Many, even most, rejected Jesus during his time on earth. To many, he was just a person to be spoken against. Many rejected him. Many just passed by without a second look and carried on as they had before. But there were those, few, who didn't. There were those who followed him. There were the disciples who gave it all up and followed Jesus. And they rose, and they became leaders of the Christian movement. They performed marvellous miracles. They were full of the very Spirit of God. Their lives were transformed. They rose and rose. Paul, we might number among them, who turned from persecutor to preacher. When we're presented with Jesus, as we are in this passage, as we are at Christmas, we will either follow him or reject him. We will either fall or rise. Don't let Christmas pass you by because you're familiar with it. Grasp this opportunity with both your hands and follow Jesus as never before. Fan the flames of your devotion in him, and you will rise, not only in this life, but also in the life to come. Because there is no standing still with Jesus. Either you follow him step by step, or you fall behind. So follow him. Have that devotion of Simeon, and then you will have peace.